So up until this point, I spent close to 100 hours combined playing Lords of the Fallen, and I simply can't put it down. Of course, big thanks to the team for the review code so I could bring you guys this review early. However, there's one major disappointment I have to share about it, which is its performance. I really wish we were past the times when games came out in a very unpolished state. Well, this isn't going to be one either. This was probably the least optimized game I played the whole year by a long shot, and I played Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Which is a shame because underneath all of these problems, there's a really good game with tons of replayability, satisfying combat, and very intricately built world with tons of things to do, discover, and see. Plus a mechanic that, in my opinion, I really want to see in many other games too. So we're going to talk about the positives, negatives, and then give it a final kind of thoughts out at the end of the review. Now, starting things off, let's talk about the negative and just get it out of the way. Performance-wise, this was an absolute mess. On a 4090, 32 gigs of DDR5, and like pretty much the latest hardware, no other game performed as bad as this. I even tried placing this on the lowest difficulty, activating performance mode, DLSS, and I was still getting stutters and hangups every few seconds. This became increasingly more, well, dreadful as I was progressing in new areas, and it's clear that by the middle and especially the end game portions, there was absolutely no optimization going on whatsoever. There were literally moments when I was fighting bosses and I could not dodge or even do anything against their attacks because the stutters were so damn bad. Now, admittedly, some of these problems were later on fixed via internal patches, and I'm pretty sure there should be a day one patch or update that should make things a bit better for you. However, if this was the case on such top-of-the-line hardware, I can only imagine how it's going to be on anything lower than that. Maybe consoles fare a bit better, but I played on the PC Steam version, so your mileage might vary a bit there. But yeah, I asked around and it seems that many other reviewers also encountered the same situation. But when it does work, it's an absolute blast to play, and I believe that it has plenty enough distinguishable features to make it stand on its own 2 feet. Especially that whole transition to the other realm thingy. That mechanic in and of itself is an absolute blast to play, and so much so that I would want to see this in other games too. It's so very well executed and it brings so much to the table, both in terms of the ways you traverse the environments and find new areas, even secret locations, all to the way to its own mechanics. The second Umbral realm kinda has its own thing going on. It's not a gimmick, but a fully fledged feature that feels naturally part of the game. There are many enemies distinctive and only exclusive to this area, to the point that they will feel different when you come here compared to lingering in your human realm. Another thing that I found equally horrific as it was interesting was the fact that I could be sitting in some random room, pretty creepy but also dark, pull up your lamp, take a glimpse into the umbral only to see literally death itself staring back at you. It was there the whole time trying to reach you, maybe even surrounded by a bunch of other ghosts doing the same. If they touch you, they will literally rip your soul out of your own body and transport you in the umbral with them, which I found absolutely mind-blowingly horrific the first time it happened. It definitely caught me off guard, but it's one of those experiences I will always remember. Definitely A+ from me on that front. And even more so, you can also rip enemy souls out of their body, and it's a whole mechanic in itself that does help you a ton in combat. Speaking of combat, it feels very satisfying. Now, it does take a bit of time to adjust to its small differences compared to Souls-like games from Software. Yeah, I do have to make that comparison because obviously the similarities are very big here, even more so compared to the first game. But I think that it's very satisfying to play and fight in Lords of the Fallen 2023. I think that they definitely nailed that aspect with a few still minor lingering issues here and there, but for the most part it feels weighty, feels satisfying. Enemy reactions are very solid, they stagger when you hit them hard. They also like get thrown away if you hit them very hard or pull off cool stuff. You will literally see bodies flowing Skyrim style, but it's intended to be that way. So very fun on that aspect, plus the build diversity is absolutely amazing. There's so much loot in this game, and it promotes so many different types of play styles that you really kind of immerse yourself into what type of character you want to be. It's not as revealing from the character selection screen because the differences between the classes are a little bit more minor at start, but once you start getting items, really cool ones from bosses and enemies, it just becomes its whole new game. Plus, everything that you see on a boss, you can get for yourself. So if it's a weapon or a very cool magical spell, you can eventually get that too and create your own build out of it, which I found really insane. The game doesn't shy away from giving you very cool loot from early on if you know where you're looking at. Also, another thing that I found really cool is that you can combine the two magical related stats, Radiance and Inferno, and kind of create a third one which is related to Umbral. So on top of the fact that you have these available early on as some of the available classes, or later on if you find the catalyst for them, you can combine these two stats and create an Umbral character instead, which I found really awesome. This game rewards your time, plain and simple, be it throughout the entire campaign, exploration, but even more so after you finish the main game. You unlock additional classes that are even stronger and gain even cooler powers outright. Now, the boss fights are also pretty good for the most part. They are a bit more telegraphed and a little bit easier compared to some of the other Souls-like games in there. Like, for example, to give you one, Pieta is the complete opposite of Mog in the Elden Ring game. Like, these are functionally and thematically completely opposite. While Mog was there to just like punish you until you get it in your head how to fight him and prepare for everything that the game throws at you, Pieta is more like a handheldy kind of combat that is very telegraphed. You can see her attacks from miles away and doesn't really prepare you even for like the basic enemies that come in a few stages later. So maybe that punishment is because it addresses to a different type of audience, but I think there's going to be a lot of overlap with Dark Souls and Elden Ring if you come from those games. This is a little bit easier on the boss fights. I found that the hordes of enemies that I was fighting by default were more tougher than most of the one-on-one boss encounters. With some exceptions, there were a few genuinely difficult in there. Anyway, I digress. The game feels very big despite maybe not being as big in terms of raw numbers, but the maps are very interconnected. There are many secret locations and every single location kind of seems to bring you back to Skyrest. Like, it's almost magic. You just feel like you're going all the way down the path into a completely different zone, up the mountains and in a completely different area for miles and miles, and only to maybe discover a elevator that was maybe locked from the other side, and this brings you back up to, you guessed it, Skyrest. Like, I think it's magic the way they do it. It's very well connected to the point that it almost makes you lose yourself into it. It almost becomes difficult to navigate on the first playthrough until you get accustomed to every single path that brings you to the proper destination. This also means that loot is extremely abundant. Like I said, rewards your time and promotes build diversity. There are many builds, including a paladin one that I already have ready for you guys in just a bit. But again, the game is very well made from all these aspects, with the exception of performance. Now, in terms of some of the other issues I encountered, nothing too unfixable, but I did get problems with collisions, getting stuck on many occasions in the environment. Also, for some reason, the camera is very bad in this game when you're targeting enemies. It doesn't prioritize ones close to you, but just pans from one to the next. So the next one might be one that's very far away, shooting at you, and you're frantically trying to take down the ones surrounding you. And it's also almost impossible to target specific ones in big groups, especially ones that tend to be more devastating and ones you want to prioritize. So they have to do something about that too. So yeah, overall my impressions about the game purely from a gameplay point of view are very solid. This is a game that I would normally recommend if you don't bother buying any other games for the remaining part of the year, or if you have a powerful enough PC or are willing to overlook those performance issues. However, if you don't like those, if you don't have a powerful hardware, or if you're planning to like just get something else, there's also Marvel Spider-Man 2, then maybe wait for a sale and wait until the game gets a lot more polished. Again, no pun intended. this is pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.